For those of you who have researched your family history, I wonder if you found any royalty back in the generations somewhere. Certainly if you're of European descent, it is very likely that you will discover that at some point you are related to royalty. Joseph Chang, who's a statistician, wrote in 1999 that for everybody living today, you only have to go back about 900 years, which is only 32 generations, to find a common ancestor. And that in fact in Europe, that common ancestor lived only 600 years ago. We share a family history, we share a common ancestry. And again, if you're of European descent, it is very likely that you will find somewhere in those generations as you go back royal ancestry because of the intermarriage between royalty and commoners. You are royalty. There is probably nothing more wondrous than the birth of a new human being, the birth of a baby girl or a baby boy. And the reason is that that new human being, that new baby boy, that new baby girl is the very apex of God's creation. That's what the creation story in Genesis chapter 1 tells us. But what that creation story tells us is that there's something even more wondrous about the birth of that new baby girl or new baby boy. And that is that baby boy or baby girl, you and I, are created in God's image. Isn't that amazing? This is how Pastor Kent Hughes puts it. The child once was not. Now, as a created soul, he or she is eternal. He or she will exist forever. When the stars of the universe fade away, that soul shall still live. Every human being, each human being, you and I, are made in the image of God. Our eternal soul is placed in us. God himself breathes life into us. Genesis 1 talks of this Hebrew word of ruah, which means breath and spirit. God breathes his spirit into us. It takes us back to Pentecost last week when we were thinking about Jesus breathing his life, breathing his spirit into his followers. Every human being has God's breath, God's spirit in them. The key verses in our passage this morning are verses 26 and 27 in chapter 1. Then God said, "Let us make human beings in our image, to be like us. They will reign over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, the livestock, all the wild animals on the earth, and the small animals that scurry along the ground." So God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. Every human being, you and I, are a concrete, embodied symbol of our Creator God. And we are the image of God, not because of our birth, not because of our family tree, not because of our ancestry, but because it is a gift from God. You are the image of God because God has given you that privilege. This is how the psalmist puts it in Psalm 8, verse 5. Yet you made them only a little lower than God and crowned them with glory and honour. You reflect God's character and glory. You bear a family resemblance to God. You look like God. In fact, you're the spitting image of God. And do you know that one of the explanations for that phrase, spitting image, is that it's a contraction of those two words, spirit and image. So you are the spirit and image of God. You are the spitting image of God. That's why God was so angry when his people decided to make graven images of him so that they could see him when they worshipped him, because there was no need to create graven images. God's image is placed in every human being. You can see God by looking at another human being. And because we are created in the image of God, because we're the spitting image of God, We are members of his royal family. And because we are members of his royal family, we are given a royal vocation. We are given the privilege of a royal job to do. This is how the psalmist describes it in Psalm 8, verse 6. You gave them charge of everything you made, putting all things under their authority. We are given the privilege as members of God's royal family to exercise his delegated powers over creation. Creation does not rule us. We steward creation on God's behalf. We rule over creation. Now, there's a very fine line between ruling creation and ruining creation, and we have to walk that line quite tightly. We are there to rule over creation, not to destroy it. This is how Pastor Bruce Vorter puts it. Dominion is not a license to caprice and tyrannies, but in the best sense, a challenge to responsibility and the duty to make right prevail. Our job as members of God's family, God's royal family, our royal job is to love and to care for his creation. And we're not always very good at that, if we're honest. In fact, we are very often like some of the lesser royals in the British royal family. We often let God's royal family down. The fact that we are made in God's image, the fact that we are gifted this place in God's royal family, makes it even more sad that we fell from that grace, that we fell from that gift when we first gave in to temptation and to sin. We still retain God's image. We're still made in the image of God. But now that image is tainted. It's muddied. The waters are muddied. The mirror doesn't quite reflect properly. As Henri Blucher puts it, our image is as a grisly shadow of himself. The snake managed to convince us that not only could we be made in the image of God, but actually we could be gods ourselves. We could have control over everything. It's a lie, of course, but we were hooked. We wanted to control everything, and since then we've tried to control everything. We've tried to control each other. We've tried to rule over each other rather than ruling over creation. We've tried to build our own kingdom instead of stewarding God's kingdom. And we're fighting a constant battle with idolatry. Way back in the Old Testament, the story of the Old Testament is God's people making graven images. That was their idolatry. That was their problem. But today, the graven images are gone, but the idolatry is still there. These days, of course, it's money, sex, power, anything that we can gain control over. Our sin clouds our sense of identity. We don't really know who we are anymore. We're not really sure of our purpose on this earth. Our sin strips us of our royalty. We are fallen members of God's royal family. So where is our hope in all of this? Our hope is in Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ bursts on the New Testament scene as a man not made in the image of God, but a man who is the image of God. This is how Paul puts it in Colossians 1, verse 15. Christ is the visible image of the invisible God. He existed before anything was created and is supreme over all creation. In his death and resurrection, Jesus Christ frees us from the slavery of sin and death, to be royalty once more, to be members of God's royal family once more, to live out our royal vocation as servant kings and queens. Jesus Christ comes and he offers us new life. He offers us new birth, a new name, a new identity, a new royal vocation, a new royal family, which we discover is a community of compassion and love. In his prologue, John says, "But to all who believed in him and accepted him, he gave the right to become children of God. They are reborn, not with a physical birth resulting from human passion or plan, but a birth that comes from God." Jesus Christ becomes like us so that we can become like him. Are you struggling to know who you are this morning? Are you struggling with your identity? Are you struggling to know what your purpose is on this earth? Are you feeling uncomfortable and out of place? Then the answer is to seek peace with God through Jesus Christ. A few weeks ago, I mentioned that Blaise Pascal says that there is an abyss in fallen human beings that can only be filled by an infinite and immutable object, which is to say, only by God himself. In other words, in every human being is a God-shaped hole that only God can fill. If you are listening to this message and you feel empty, you feel out of place, you feel uncomfortable, then take this opportunity this morning to seek God's forgiveness, to seek his righteousness, and come to him, and all fullness will be yours. You are made in the spitting image of God. You are royalty. You are a member of his royal family. You are the spitting image of God. You're not your job title. You're not your career. You're not your education. You're not your desires or your passions. You are not even your sin, either past or present. You are made in the image of God. You are royalty. Your destiny is to be a member of God's royal family. You're a prince or princess of the divine royal family. If you're watching with someone else this morning, then just have a look around at them. They bear the same family resemblance. They are members of God's royal family too. They are royalty. If you're watching on your own, then just imagine in your mind's eye your family, your friends, your neighbours, your co-workers, people that you meet out in your community, those who are working in shops or in the NHS or in all sorts of other places. Each one of them bears the same family resemblance. They too are royalty. They are princes and princesses of God. That's good news to share with them this week. You are royalty. Why not take the opportunity this week to tell someone that good news?